Hello everyone, welcome in. This is section 2.3, Introduction to the Basic Principles of Animation, and HAVTZA's Coloso class, Step-by-Step Guide to Indie Animation Production. So welcome in guys, this is section 2.3 as mentioned, and first and foremost, I just wanted to front with an apology. I apologize for the delay with everything. I've had a lot going on. I've had a lot of mechanical issues with my car that still haven't been fixed. So I'm probably just going to take it to a shop at this point. So that's been delaying it as I've been trying to work on it myself. I've been focusing on my UI UX approach for the spring and trying to make sure I have enough time between now and then to set up a portfolio, in which I'm probably just going to have to quit my second job so I can give myself enough time to not only do that, but focus on delivering more content and higher quality content for these Coloso reviews. But in any case, it's been really busy. So again, I apologize for the delay. And remember that if there ever is, you can always subscribe and you will be notified if you ring the bell or whatever for when future uploads come out. So totally up to you, but in any case, I hope these Coloso reviews help. So getting right into the notes for today, HAVTZA's main point for this class is pretty much about understanding the principles of animation, like said, but really understanding why they do what they do. So you don't have to be a good artist to be an animator since it requires basic drawing skills and understanding movement. And other people can touch up and refine the aesthetics later in the pipeline process, so long as you understand movement. So really understanding these design principles are going to be what gets you either your professional work as an animator or just making sure that your animations actually display a grasp and understanding of giving life to your drafts and your 2D illustrations. So animation is about aesthetics, but it is mainly about physics and movement is the big takeaway for that. After that, it's pretty much just digging into the 12 principles of animation, which are highlighted and explained in other terms and other explanations on other resources that you can find online or through books or other media. So keep in mind that all of these are defined by HAVTZA herself. Remember that the principles of animation double for both animation and design choices in animation. So not only are they principles and techniques to apply, but they also help determine a lot of deciding factors in what to include in your animation and how to approach it. And so for the 12 principles of animation, HAVTZA actually groups them together by their relevancy to one another into three main groups. The first one is going to be the design of the animation, which generally includes what are going to be your main and top considerations when designing your animation. The next is going to include animation-specific techniques, and then last is going to include real-life physics and how they're displayed in animation. So for the design group, your first principle is going to be appeal. Which is pretty much how good your designs are within your project. So keep in mind that they are subjective, meaning it's best to be versatile and consistent with your drawings. So have a consistent style and quality that you can show for your animations, which will also help for displaying your work in a professional manner in both a commercial side and a freelancing side. That way, prospecting customers and consumers for your content will know what to expect. Make your work efficient and quick with this too, so if needed, simplify your design to where you need. So pretty much what this is style and quality of your animations. Next is going to be solid drawing, which pretty much is just understanding the fundamentals and displaying them in your animations. So it's very important for independent animators and making sure that they can cover their necessities by themselves. So knowing fundamentals of solid drawing will pretty much help you illustrate what you intend to with your animation with purpose. Next is going to be staging, which mainly describes presentation and is dependent on the subjective vision of the animation. And it's going to present your animation subject clearly within each scene, and it's going to make it clear to the viewer. At least ideally it should be. So pretty much what staging is trying to frame the content of your animation the best way possible, whether in consideration of a different color scheme, different perspective, etc., etc. And then the last principle to this group is going to be secondary action guidelines, which is going to be any action that supports the main action, which shows intent and purpose of the character. It gives animation a more detailed and defined look, and is independent to the main action, and is a stylistic addition to the animation. Because of that, it brings more realism and nuance to animations, but may be limited by project scope/factors. So secondary action is pretty much what you add on to sell the motion of the main action. So if I were to throw a ball, you might see in the animation the opposing arm swing forwards as the ball gets thrown. So even though it's not the arm that's throwing the object and is the main focus of the animation, it has relevance to the main action in general. But because of that, it's a little bit extraneous, and by project scope, if they don't have the budget for it in a group that you're working with, they may just remove a lot of these secondary action guidelines in general. Next in the groups comes the animation techniques, The first one is going to be squash and stretch, which refers to deformations or stylistic changes applied to the shape of an object in order to show its characteristics or its movement in a better way of the animation. So if you think like in a ball, it looks kind of plain if it retains its shape while it's bouncing up and down on the ground, but if we were to flatten that ball as it reaches the bottom, it helps sell the impact of the ball against the ground and the bounce back up. So squash and stretch also includes smear and impact frames that replicate how the eye perceives things. So this is what's going to create it a little bit more realistic in how we perceive the motion. Next is straight ahead and pose to pose, which are the two main techniques to animation, where straight ahead is free animation, where the movement is based on a frame by frame basis, each one drawn from the other one. With this, it runs the risk of deforming over time as changes to each frame can't be compared entirely. And keep in mind, this is deforming in the definition of literally changing from its original intent and not deforming as in stylistic changes. So these would be unintentional changes made to the animation and how it appears. So that may be character proportions, different character elements, or different animation elements around the character. And then the look of the movement or exaggeration is generally better animated using this method, i.e. action, clothing, or hair. So because of that, things that are animated sort of in consideration of the movement only, like hair and clothing that move relative to the character, are going to work best with this approach. And with that, pose to pose is your other one, which is planned animation where keyframes are drawn first and then the in-betweens are added in later. So this approach is more methodical and gives less room for nuance in your movement, which is good for small and subtle movements or where the character is the focus on the scene. This helps create a consistent look across your full animation sequence, but because of that, it kind of removes a lot of the individual nuances of each individual frame, because you're keeping a lot stronger of a consistency between each frame. So knowing which technique is better for your scene is good, but normally the approach will be pose to pose, so keep that in mind. The next principle we're going to go over is exaggeration, which is used to sell the idea of the animation rather than be accurate and realistic. So this is kind of relative to squash and stretch, but less about the motion and how we perceive it, and more about whatever stylistic change you might want to make in general. This might be a cowlick reacting to the character at the top of their head, which wouldn't be realistic and wouldn't be representative of squash and stretch, but is still an exaggeration of the character and the animation in general. And then the last principle in this group is going to be your timing guidelines, which can relate to the timing of each relevant frame in the action or to the action in the animation itself. So with this, you kind of start pushing into the real life physics principles, but a good way to reference this is sort of to the fact that in any animation, it's not often that the timing between each frame or the action in the animation sequence is equal. So maybe in like a fighting scene, the wind up to the punch is generally slower than the actual action from holding up the fist to the impact of the collision. So timing guidelines will really help set the pace for the animation and the feel of it. And then your last group of principles are going to be your real life physics. The first of which being anticipation, which shows how force is expressed or created. And anticipation really just gives context to forces on objects and is usually represented by a delay in timing and a shift in position to give clarity to the movement. A good example of anticipation is dropping down on your knees before springing up and showing that the character is essentially creating force by exerting more power against the ground. In order to better represent that, we would show the character getting into a crouched position, which helps generate more force and gives context to where this force is really coming from the character. Next is going to be your follow through and overlapping action, which refers to the momentum of an object and ensures each movement in an animation is complete because it follows through the motion and overlapping into the next action. So a good example of this, if we're referring back to the example we used in anticipation, is a character jumping up and down. Where we would see follow through and overlapping action is if we saw that the shirt of this character would spring up with them as they sprung up against the ground, and then as they landed, we would see that shirt flatten out as gravity and the force of falling would help push that shirt and spread it out downwards, and then we would see that shirt recover back to its normal form as the character returns to baseline. So what this does is it pretty much helps define the force relative to the objects around it and expresses the character in a little bit more of a realistic way as they sequence through animation in general. Next is your ease in and your ease out guidelines, which demonstrates laws of acceleration for objects in movement and is really just defined by the distance change between each frame, which implies speed and acceleration. It is the basis to any movement in animation, and each animation will have an ease in and ease out factor. So still using the jumping example, you would see a lot more frames at the bottom as the character is in anticipation to jump, and at the top as they slow down before falling back down due to gravity in your animation. Because of this, you would actually see the character move vertically, less space near the top of the arc of their jump, which would help imply and sell the speed and acceleration of their movement. And then finally, your last principle is going to be your curves, which help determine character poses and specifics like hair and clothing, and it gives characteristics of the movement to object specifics. Curves are more so relevant to extraneous details of the character or extraneous objects within the animation, but they really help sell the fluidity and how solid that subject is of what you're animating and the motion that they're going through. So as a quick summary to everything, and what pretty much all of this goes over, is to understand the principles of animation and their impacts on animation, so knowing what you might need to change in order to help animate with intention for what you intend to do. And then prioritize communicating movement first and aesthetics second, as we mentioned near the top of this lecture review. And then the self-assigned homework that I thought was appropriate is to incorporate one element of each design group in the back pocket ideas made in the self-assigned homework of 2.2 all the way up here, and really how they can be illustrated in the animation. So you can just list them out with the same thing that we did, just writing them down with the back pocket ideas as expressed earlier. So that was section 2.3. Really exciting stuff we're looking forward to as we really start digging into the basics of design and showing off a lot more of how we animate in general with HAVTZA. So keep in mind that you can always keep on top of further uploads like section 3.1 on this channel or on my socials, which I'll plug around the screen here, that you can check out for other content also made by me too. And then keep in mind too that with these socials, as well as my channel or on any of my videos, you can always leave comments or questions down there or on my socials, and I'm more than happy to help respond and answer to those. As always, thank you guys so much for joining into my lecture review today, and I really hope to see you guys in the next section as we work into some new processes of animation with HAVTZA. As always, I hope you guys have a good day, and make sure to take it easy. Bye-bye.